Okay, so I grew up in Manchester, England, in an Orthodox Jewish family, and I've been crazy about animals for as long as I can remember. Always, wanted to have a zoo, that kind of thing, always keeping unusual exotic pets. And after I finished high school, because as is traditionally done in Orthodox Jewish communities, I went to study at a yeshiva, right, an intense college for religious studies, at which point I decided that I would like to be involved in Jewish education, become a rabbi. And then one day I decided to look into, what does the Bible, what does Judaism have to say about the animal kingdom? And I found an incredible amount of material, which I started researching, studying, writing books about. Then I started running different education programs at different zoos in Jerusalem, in the United States, in Canada, Australia. And then eventually I opened up my own place, the Biblical Museum of Natural History in Beit Shemesh, Israel. I think the basic concept of the connection between the Bible and the animal kingdom is something of great significance and interest and novelty. And it has many different aspects. The fascinating intellectual journey of identifying the animals of the Bible and how they were misidentified over history. There's looking at the symbolism. Right? Mostly when animals appear in the Bible, it's in the writings of the prophets where they used to convey different motifs. And there's looking at all the principles of how we interact with animals. There's resolving conflicts that arise between the Bible and modern science. Many different aspects of this topic.
So has there been any change in the role of the animals in the Bible through history, or how people perceive that? And now you are...
Interesting. Like I said, most of the reference to the animals in the Bible are not talking about animals as actual participants in events, but rather they're being presented as motifs. Like the prophets will describe how this animal does this and this animal does that to conjure up a particular, state of mind or whatever it is, or to teach a particular lesson. So what does that mean? It means that these are scenes, characters that were extremely familiar in people's lives. And therefore they would draw upon the animal kingdom to present ideas, to present concepts, which is something that nowadays is almost not done at all. Right? If you want to give a metaphor now, people draw on pop trivia and in movies. But back then they drew upon the animal world, and they reflect a very intimate knowledge of the natural world. So you see how much more connected people were with nature back then.
I think that we are losing that connectiveness to nature. And as far as I'm concerned, that's also one of the key issues in many of the problems we have today. Talk about, the corona pandemic may be one. We actually see a kind of disturbed relationship we have with animals. You have the bioindustry. You have a lot of relationships with animals that are not going, I think, that well nowadays.
Right.
And how do you see that? Do you think that's indeed the case? Do you experience similar things in our relationships today with animals?
Oh, sure. I mean, you just see people now, again, most of our experiences with the Jewish community. The Jewish community nowadays is very urbanized, extremely urbanized, right? If you're talking about English speaking, so they are, almost all from New York, right? Or in England, where I come from, almost all from London or Manchester, right? The big cities. And Jews from other parts of the world, again, they're mostly urbanized. It's changing a little bit now in Israel. But it means that people have, especially children, very little, intimate experience with animals. And also because there's not been much in the way of pets, right? In terms of dogs, things like that. Definitely there's been very little dog keeping for two reasons. Partly there was a big cultural hangover after the Holocaust against dogs. And therefore, many Jews inherited this fear of dogs because of the way dogs were used in the Holocaust. But also because economic pressures. Jews often have large families, so they don't have the resources for a dog. So, you know, that intimate familiarity with an animal is lacking. In general, you know, we see this amongst children, a tremendous fascination with animals. Interestingly, in the museum, we're a bit of an unconventional museum. We're a bit, you know, less formal. We have a lot of stuff for kids to play with, even things like dress-up animal costumes, puppets, you know, all these things, you know, to bring to make kids, you know, be thrilled with animals in all kind of different ways. You know, I've thought about it a lot. You know, what is the fascination with animals about? I really think there's two types of animal lovers. There's the people who emotionally bond with animals, right? And then there's the people who are fascinated by the diversity of animal life, of the animal kingdom. So I think the animal kingdom presents this rich diversity, which is unparalleled, you know, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different behaviors, different textures, different smells, different sounds. It's just so, you know, incredibly diverse. It's interesting, there's like 18 different commandments in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, about compassion to animals, a lot of which revolve around the dietary laws. And if you look at the commandments revolving around the dietary laws, it's all about taking something that could potentially be extremely, you know, brutal and trying to refine it as much as possible. So, like, you're not allowed to just tear a limb off an animal and eat it. It has to be slaughtered first. You can't eat the blood. The blood represents, you know, the vitality of the animal, the life force. The blood has to be, for certain animals, has to be given a token burial in the earth. You can't mix milk with meat because, you know, milk is life and meat is death. So it's all these different components which are taking what could be a very brutal act and refining it as much as possible. It's interesting because, you know, in terms of the dietary laws in the Jewish community, so it's just something which modern society has changed beyond recognition. Because again, it used to be, you know, you'd have your cow or your chicken in your garden, and, you know, you'd live through all these processes and laws. But nowadays, of course, it's not like that. Most people have, you know, never seen a live cow or a live chicken. So, you know, it's a bit unfortunate. You know, people think chickens grow on supermarket shelves. But essentially in the Bible, what you see happening is trying to, you know, this sensitivity to the gravity of what's taking place, of taking an animal's life and trying to make it, transform it from a barbaric act into a respectful act. Here's a classic issue I say would be factory farming, where the issue is not so much how the animals are killed, it's how the animals live. You know, chickens have been selectively bred to produce chickens. You know, chickens lead horrible lives. Not even necessarily just the conditions, just the breeds of chicken themselves have been developed to pack on meat as much as possible. They don't have the bone strength to support it. And these are things which the average person, you know, doesn't think about because you don't see it, you don't realize it. And obviously it was done for economic reasons. And then once you tell people that, you know, to have a heritage breed of chicken, which the taste is a bit different and it's, you know, going to cost many times the amount of a normal chicken, a lot of people are just not going to go for it. So it's going to be a tremendous educational hurdle to make people care about the conditions of animals, which they never see. We can't anthropomorphize animals too much, right? Most animals, they don't have a concept of freedom. Right? Animals have a concept that for an animal to be happy, it wants its territory, right? It wants security, it wants food, it wants water. It doesn't have a concept of freedom. So many animals can lead perfectly content lives in captivity with a lot less stresses than they would endure in the wild. You know, captive raised animals are usually in much, much better condition than wild animals. I'm talking about animals raised that obviously kept in the proper conditions, right? We're not talking about, you know, zoos of 50 years ago where they used to keep animals in terrible conditions. So I believe that most animals do not suffer in captivity at all. And even if they do suffer, that suffering, is minimal and is justified by the tremendous educational benefit for people.
As you are a rabbi, Nathan, what would be your wise words and advice for us connecting to animals, nature, to the source of life?
Most people don't even notice things, right? They won't be able to notice it. Oh, that's a bird. What kind of bird is it? Is it a minor bird, or is it a native pied wagtail? That people to just open their eyes and think about the little bits of nature that they do get to see, and appreciate it a little bit more. Think about it a little bit more. That's our goal. Half of our visitors are religious Jews, and showing them what the Bible itself has to say about sensitivity to animals will hopefully, make them realize that, this is also very much a part of Judaism, just as much as the Sabbath and these other things. Making them realize that the dietary laws are not just a dry code, but something actually reflecting compassion to animals. And although nowadays the modern food industry might be consistent with the letter of the law, but it might not be consistent with the spirit of the law. So these are the kinds of things we're hoping to have an impact with.
Right. And Nathan, do you also feel that contact with animals, having compassion for animals and nature brings people closer to God, and that it impacts their religious lives?
Sure, because it's an aspect of religious identity that people don't normally think about, right? Especially, religious identity, let's say for Jews, is normally thought of in terms of, synagogue, things like that, Yom Kippur, things like that. When people think about it, oh no, it's also in terms of, the animals and their significance and the lessons they have for our lives, and how the prophets, were just immersed in the natural world and drawing upon it. So I think that shows people how spirituality, and again, different people are able to experience spirituality in different ways. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. There are people who can get spiritually connected in a synagogue, but there's other people who can't, but they can get spiritually connected by, appreciating a beautiful bird or even a beautiful beetle. And I'll just tell you one beautiful story. There's a great rabbi in the 19th century, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch of Germany. And he went to visit the Alps. And somebody said to him, why, you're an important rabbi, chief rabbi of the community, why are you going to visit the Alps? He said, because, when I die and I'm going to appear before God, he's going to say to me, "No, Shimshon, what did you think of my Alps?" And I want to be able to know what to say to him.